In the United States, we have had great amounts of people who have come to this country from all over the world and from every single continent, and that has greatly changed the United States. In addition, the United States trades with countries from all over the world. You may be using a cell phone that was made in Asia, or you may be writing with a pen that was made in Mexico, and this has greatly influenced the United States. Well, in the same way, migration and trade has influenced other civilizations as well. Now, in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at how did migration and trade influence the civilizations in ancient India. Let's go ahead and get started. Today's goal is to learn about the civilizations of ancient India. And in order to do that, we first need to learn about the geography of ancient India. Secondly, we need to describe the characteristics of early Indian civilizations. And third and final, we need to explain the advancements made during India's Golden Age. But while we're doing all this, make sure you keep your eyes open for these words to know. Your academic word is tolerance, and the rest are your domain or this lesson specific words. Those are caste system, monsoon, subcontinent, and Vedas. Like I said, make sure you keep your eyes open for all of these words to know. Take a look at that lesson question, scholars. It's at the top of the screen. It says, how did migration and, that's right, trade influence civilizations in ancient India? In order to answer that question, we need to look at it in three different ways. In the first way, we need to look at the geography of India, and we'll see how geography played a key role in the civilizations of ancient India. Then, we're going to build on that knowledge, and in the second part, we're going to look at the Mauryan Empire, and we're really going to see how the Mauryan Empire greatly influenced ancient India in terms of its trade. And in the third part, we're going to see and we're going to talk about India's Golden Age. And again, you're really going to see how trade influenced India during that time period. And by looking at these three different parts, we'll definitely be able to answer this lesson question. Before we focus on just India, let's take a step back and look at the River Valley civilizations that you may have looked at during this course. One of them was the Huanghe, which was in China. Another one was in Mesopotamia around the Tigris and the Euphrates. And the other one along the Nile was ancient Egypt. And today we're going to be looking at the Indus River one, which is in the Indus Valley. But what ties all of these together are the rivers, because these rivers allow for the growing of the surplus of crops, and once you have a surplus of crops, that will allow for the establishment of settlements. Those settlements will grow larger and will gradually become civilizations. Back to that lesson question, which is at the top of the screen. Follow along with me. It says, how did migration and trade influence civilizations in ancient India? Well, the first part of this lesson is going to focus on the geography of India, and that will help us to answer that lesson question. Let's go ahead and get started with the first part. The geography of India and the Indian subcontinent is extremely diverse, and it has many features. Now, subcontinent is a large landmass that is attached to an even larger continent. So what I mean by that is you can see all of India right here, but India is connected to Asia, which is to its north. That's what we're talking about when we're referring to subcontinent. Now, like we said, it has a number of features, like the Himalayan mountains, which you can see right along here. There's also the Indus as well as the Ganges rivers. Here's the Indus River, and the Ganges River is right here. There's also the Thar Desert, which is located right around here. So obviously there are a lot of diverse geographic features in the Indian subcontinent. Another key aspect of the Indian subcontinent, or something that plays a major role in it, are the summer monsoons. Here's what happens. Our winds that come off the Indian Ocean, those winds come through and they pick up moisture in the clouds. But these winds, they push the clouds across the Indian subcontinent until they reach the Himalayas. But the Himalayas are so high up that the clouds hit the Himalayas and they can't get over the Himalayas. The wind isn't able to push them. So because they hit there, then they drop all of their rain at the base of the Himalayan mountains. And this rain many times can cause flooding, but it plays a key role in essentially watering the rest of the subcontinent. And one thing that really one river that really benefits from these monsoons is the Indus River. Again, it's right up here. Now this annual monsoon-related flooding, it spreads rich soil. So it'll flood up in the north, up here. And as the river floods, it deposits this rich soil all along the banks of the Indus River Valley, which is located on either side of the river. And by having that rich soil, the first civilizations resided in the Indus River because that rich soil allowed for the surplus of crops to be grown, and that surplus of crops can support a settlement, and that settlement will grow larger and become some of the first civilizations in India. Utilizing the rich soil that allowed the surplus of crops to be grown, around 320 BCE, people along the Indus River Valley began to build cities. Now, two of the largest and most well-known cities were Harappa, and the second was Mohenjo-daro. You can actually see a picture of Mohenjo-daro to the right, and that's what we're going to talk about for a second. Now, these cities, they were laid out in a grid. And again, if I draw your attention over here, you can see the straight lines. It's almost like this city was laid out as a checkerboard. Now, the people in these cities, they used a written language, and they also traded goods with faraway civilizations as well. Now, no one is quite sure what happened to the city of Harappa or the city of Mohenjo-daro. They're not sure if they died off because of a drought or of a flood. But what we do know is that around 2000 BCE, the Aryans migrated into northern India. Now, these nomadic herders, they came across the Hindu Kush Mountains, which is around modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan. And they came down into the Indus River Valley right here, but they also went into the rest of India. Once they came in to India, they adopted the local farming techniques, and they also spread throughout the Indus, like we said, but they also went to the Ganges River Valley as well. You recall where that is? Well, if you thought about right over here, you would be correct. So great job. But along with this, the Aryans, they brought a number of great cultural changes, and they had a huge influence on the people of India as well. And some of the cultural elements that they brought with them was, one, a caste system. Now, a caste system is a strict social system that divided Indian society. In fact, it ran essentially all aspects of your life during this time. What kind of job you could have, who you could marry, and it still plays a very influential role in Indian society to this very day. The second key attribute, or the second key influence of the Aryans, was a polytheistic religion, or the belief in many gods. This would play a key role in the development of Hinduism, and Hinduism is one of the 5 world religions. Now, the third thing, or the third influence of the Aryans, were the Vedas, which were a collection of prayers, rituals, and hymns, and these as well would play a key role in Hinduism. And finally, there was Sanskrit, which was a spoken language. The actual written Sanskrit did not become a written language until around 500 BCE. But the big takeaway here is that many of these ideas would become important in the development of Hinduism. And to this very day, Hinduism plays an extremely important role in modern-day India. Wonderful job, scholars. You finished the first part of the lesson. On to the second part. Only 2 more left. You're doing great. Stay with me. Before we move on to the second part, take a look at that lesson question with me. It's at the top of the screen. It says, how did migration and trade influence civilizations in ancient India? Recall In the first part, we looked at the geography of India, how there were a number of different geographic features, and one of the key aspects, or one key thing that plays a key role in the geography of India, were those summer monsoons that allowed the rich soil to flood the banks of the Indus River Valley, allowing for the creation of the first settlements. Well, one of the first civilizations, or one of the first empires to grow up along the banks of the Indus River Valley was the Mauryan Empire, and that's what we're going to look at in this second part. Let's go ahead and get started. The main founder of the Mauryan Empire was a man named Chandragupta Maurya, who founded the empire based on his name in 321 BCE. Remember, that's before Common Era. And he was able to unify this vast territory you see here by raising a vast army. And he paid for this army of over 600,000 soldiers by raising large amounts of taxes from the people in India. And with that army, he conquered vast amounts of territory, but he was able to unite the Indian subcontinent for the first time. You can see that right here, where here is the empire, all of this dark green, and these tributaries. These are states or areas that would actually still pay taxes and would pay homage to the Mauryan Empire. Now his grandson, Chandragupta's grandson, was Ashoka, and he brought the empire to its greatest height. And he did this in a number of different ways. First, he expanded the empire's size. Now, he first did this through military conquest. But an interesting story. The story goes that after there was a vicious battle that took place, Ashoka and his troops actually lost 100,000 soldiers in this really bloody battle. And after that battle, the story goes, is that Ashoka became a follower of Buddhism and he rejected violence. He saw that all this violence and how many people had died in that battle, and he thought, I want no part of this. And because of that violence that he saw, on the flip side, he embraced peace, fairness, and religious tolerance. And so you can really see how that one event, the cause of that one event, was for him to turn away from violence. And during his reign, there were a number of different achievements. For example, he modernized the empire through roads, and those roads allowed for faster communication between the different cities. He also brought about great achievements in science. In addition, he also helped spread Buddhism across South Asia. And helping him spread Buddhism was he built these large pillars, which are still in India to this very day. Think about that. These things are still standing hundreds of years after they were built. And on these pillars, you can't really see it here, but there's writing at the base, where Ashoka talks about his ruling dynasty, his ideas of leadership, his ideas that really embraced Buddhism. And so the big takeaway here is that Ashoka embraced Buddhism and allowed it to spread, especially in Southeast Asia. Wonderful job, scholars. You finished the first 2 parts of the lesson. You only have 1 more left. Stay with me. You're doing great. Before we go on to the 3rd part of this lesson, take a look at that lesson question. It's at the top of the screen. It says, how did migration as well as trade influence civilizations in ancient India? Recall in the first part, we looked at the geography of India, how those summer monsoons allowed for the creation of the first ever civilizations. And we also looked at the role that Aryan migration played and how that influenced the civilizations in ancient India. Then, in the second part, we looked at the Mauryan Empire. We talked about Chandragupta as well as his grandson Ashoka, and they were able to unify and expand the Mauryan Empire, and there were a number of achievements too. Now, in this third part, we're going to be looking at India's Golden Age. Let's go ahead and get started with this third part, scholars. After the collapse of the Mauryan Empire, India descended into a time of chaos. However, that all ended after about 500 years with the rise of the Gupta Empire around 320 CE, or 320 years after the year 0. Now this happened when 2 families were brought together and they created a new empire, and that empire was named the Gupta Empire. Now, the Gupta Empire, it lasted from about 320 to about 600 CE. And during this time, this is referred to as India's Golden Age for a number of reasons, which we're going to take a look at in a few seconds. But the big takeaway here is that this time is characterized by great advancements, not only in trade, but in technology as well as culture. Now let's focus on this first one, trade, and recall that this is part of the lesson question, the influence of trade. Now, there was a huge expansion of trade going on at this time. Now, what I want you to notice here is look at China here. Here's the Middle East. Here's Africa, and Europe is way up here. Now, India acted as almost the middleman, if you will, where all goods would cross essentially through India. In addition, India had a number of goods to trade as well. Look at some of them in here. You have gemstones. You have timber. There is cloth, and there is also ivory. And all of these things were wanted. They were desired all around the world. But in addition, you had goods coming to India, such as silk from China and spices as well. So they were coming from China and coming through India. And this was critical because this trade was very influential in India, not only for bringing India new customs and exporting India culture, but it also brought a great deal of wealth to the Gupta Empire. Now, the effects of the Gupta Empire's trade network, there were many. One is that the merchants, they profited from trade between Europe and China. Remember, they were that middleman. Two, because of all this wealth and because of all this trade, banking developed in India. And three is that Indian culture spread across Asia, and this was in direct relationship because of that trade. So it wraps back to that lesson question where you can see trade really influenced early Indian civilizations. Because of advanced trade, there was a spread of ideas, and this spread of ideas facilitated scientific as well as mathematical advancements in the Gupta Empire. Some of those included an introduction of zero and a modern numbering system, which is critical for trade, the creation of a decimal system, again, very critical when you're dealing with weights and measures. There was also an advanced astronomy to calculate the accurate length of a year, and this is centuries before the use of a modern calculator, which is pretty incredible. There were also advances in chemistry and medicine. There have been books on medicine found that had over 1,000 procedures as well as over 500 medicinal plants that could be found in India. That's obviously a huge advancement. Now, in addition to scientific and mathematical advancements, there were also cultural advancements, where the production of Sanskrit works in poetry and literature were done. There was also the development of classical dance, and there was also the growth of Hindu sculpture and monumental architecture. And in addition, there was a spread of Buddhism and Hinduism that happened all across Asia. Now, this picture here is an early form of, you spot that game? Well, it's an early form of chess of its day. But what I want you to get from this part is that because of trade, that influenced a number of areas and led directly to many great advancements during India's Golden Age. We're going to take a look at a timeline of early civilizations in India. And this is a great way graphically to line up what we've been talking about throughout this lesson. So just a couple things. You can see that in 1750 BCE, there was the decline of the Indus River Valley civilization, and around 1500 BCE, the beginning of the Aryan migration. There's also the Mauryan Empire as well as the Gupta Empire. But let's take a step further back and see what was going on in another large area of Asia, specifically in China, where you have the Zhou dynasty and the Qin dynasty. Now, a key thing to think about here is there are two things that are tying these two cultures together. One is that they both developed along river valley civilizations, and those river valleys were allowed to grow a surplus of food. That surplus of food allowed for the development of civilization. But another thing that linked the Zhou as well as the Mauryan Empire was that trade that we've been speaking about.